Naked Shamanism. Welcome to With Insights Radio. I'm your host, Iggy Garcia. I will take you on a journey across the universe through shamanism, metaphysical, and holistic. So sit back and relax and enjoy the show.
Well, we could just jump into it. If Iggy's having trouble connecting, we do have some talking points we wanted to start on.
Yeah, we can do that.
Let me send him a quick message real quick.
Yeah. Pull up the chat thing. But this table is wiggly, isn't it?
A little bit, yeah.
Be careful not to bump it.
Yeah, he's good.
Yes. Are you still online? Yes, he says. Go for it. Okay, your turn.
All right, no problem. We've been asked a lot, especially over the last several weeks, for our perspective as Nemenhapeli and permaculturists on recent and ongoing world events. One of the major concerns that is brought to us is how do we respond in proper thought, proper thinking instead of panic.
Yeah.
What we're getting a lot of from people is a lot of panic, especially when they go to the grocery store, which used to be absolutely dependable, except for, those early days in the COVID pandemic,
right?
When supplies were gone. And now people are still going into the store looking for things that they are conditioned to being able to buy, always able to buy, always able to purchase, and their shelves are bare. And the stores continue to reassure us that supplies are coming. It's just slow. Distribution is still happening. It's still good. But the underlying constraints, the underlying constraints on distribution leave everyone on edge, especially people who are dependent on the global distribution lines, the global resources, who make no food of their own, especially people with personalized, specialized diets, who depend on exotic foods that don't grow locally, that they have to import in, such as chia seeds and some of the tropical fruits and the vegetables and other nuts that don't grow here. They have to get those from outside the country.
Well, or even plants foodstuffs that could grow here, but have actually been outsourced to other countries.
Regardless, right.
So whether they're exotic or not, we still have to get them from somewhere else. Those are it's the same supply line, same problem.
And so we are asked to address this issue on two fronts. The major front is, of course, the permaculture front, which is right livelihood, food production, people care, earth care.
Yeah.
This is a running concern. One of the comments that's been made to us repeatedly is, all of this is just happening out of the blue. It's just catching us broadside. We're blindsided by this pandemic, these issues, the economic, the political issues. And we Nemenhapeli are sitting back and going, nuh-uh. We've been seeing these patterns for a very long time. We've not been able to pinpoint exactly when it was going to happen, but we've been very sensitive to the tipping points as they've emerged, one point after another. This is it, and the fact that we have been aware of these things going to be happening does not make it easier to address how we feel about it, or how difficult it is to get people to change or consider changing some of the patterns of behavior that have led to their efforts, their stress, and their constrictions in time of crisis. So the other front that we take on this is the psychological, the emotional front. Now, this is where Nemenha ideology, Nemenha spirituality kind of butts heads with a lot of the mainstream ideas out there. And that is that we Nemenha do not agree with detaching ourselves from our negative emotions.
Right.
The crisis produces many elements of fear, anxiety, apprehension, uncertainty, insecurity. These are issues that everybody's dealing with, especially with an ongoing war across the sea that was not provoked. There are people who are split. Should we be more involved with the war? Should we not be involved at all? And what's that going to do to the supply line? The reality is that we have to break it down even further, because a person going to work every day here in the US and going home, cooking their food, can contribute about that much to what's going on overseas. It takes bigger powers, it takes bigger organizations to make any positive impact on the atrocities that are happening over there. So what we have to do, because we are Nemenha, is we have to take things down into the home and hearth.
So what we can do here.
What we can do here, what we can do now. And I got to tell you, for anybody who has their mind fixated on elevating themselves beyond the physical necessities of life and living and happiness, they should just sign off right now.
Ascension. They should ascend.
Because nothing I'm going to say will actually be relevant to them.
They should ascend right off the Facebook thing. They should click the button, and because it's not gonna work for them. Click the button.
Explain that. Explain that.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. In the Menha ideology, we believe in a concept that we call entanglement. We don't believe in a detachment of oneself from the natural forces, the natural elements, whether that is a physical stimulus from our environment or a psychological stimulus that triggers an emotional response. We Nemenha believe in immersing ourselves in nature, inside and outside. True Nemenha shamanism involves a deep, abiding love of nature because we're as much immersed in it as we can possibly be.
Right.
Which is why many of us anchor ourselves with the ancient spirituality of the Nemenha in conjunction with permaculture. Because permaculture is one of those most logical pursuits in a physical aspect to what we're trying to do spiritually at the same time. We can take what we believe spiritually and convert it into soil and plants and food and production. We have no interest in hurrying up and waiting for things to change, waiting for vibrations to change, waiting for spirits to change, waiting for gods or aliens to step in and solve our problems for us. I mean, we believe in exerting the power that we have been gifted with already in proactive, positive, healing ways. And that means getting out there and striking the medium. Because nature is real. There is nothing more real to us than the natural world around us. And because of that, we have to get ourselves dirty. We have to get ourselves into it. Mm-hmm. The only reason we can hear the micro radio wave songs of the stars across history is because we created, with the laws of nature, our discovery of technology and materials, we created micromembranes that were able to be impacted, and electrode sensors able to detect minute shifts in this membrane, in this huge array that can detect the difference between light from our star and light from a star further away. But the membrane is the key. The medium is the key. It is a physical substance. It's not an emotion. It's not an energy. It is a material substance that is impacted by other matter in an energetic state. We're talking micro radio waves. And science has I'm not a scientist, I'm a philosopher, and I like science, it's fun. But we've been able to develop so much scientifically because of the basis that matter and energy are not that different. And when you try to put them on a pedestal, one over the other, the logic, the natural laws break down. When the two are working in conjunction, you have matter in an energized state, such as micro radio waves being emitted from a star, impacting, pounding the drum that is the radio receiver.
Right.
And that is taken into a translation device, a detection and translation device, which converts it into visual and auditory outputs for us to then translate in our brains. And somehow super smart people figure out how to translate into usable English, or whatever language.
Is that it? Is that the language?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like Wookiee.
You'll have to excuse me.
That wasn't exactly
drink my medicine.
No, you're good. It's nice to have a little humor in life sometimes when we're so serious.
Absolutely essential.
A little burping on Facebook. Never heard anybody.
We can do Wookiee.
Well, he can do Wookiee.
I can't do that.
All right.
So,
no, but continue.
Yeah, so for Nemenha, even especially anciently, every single ancient ceremony, ritual, meditation, everything involved some kind of physical expression, physical verbal expression that was conjoined with the highly spiritual, enlightened concept that they were ingraining in their minds, they were focusing on. And even just the problem solving itself, every single thing was involved in a physical expression to produce a physical manifestation of a spiritual concept. This is why we build medicine bundles. It's not because the items in the bundle themselves carry some unique arcane power. It's that our bundle carries with it the mantle, the burden of being a physical manifestation of highly deep spiritual principles that guide us in our lives. Right. We believe that thought and intention alone is just the first piece of the puzzle. It's just the blueprint. But until you actually put your hands in the dirt, until you actually start moving matter with your matter, nothing itself will change. This includes healing. There are so many aspects of personal healing that are entirely physical, and we would assert that it's all physical. As much as it's spiritual, it is all physical. So when you engage in a deep spiritual meditation to enhance the healing powers of your body, it's not your thoughts that are healing your body. It's all the cells that have been spurred into powerful action by your focused intention. But it's still the cells doing the work. They're still getting their hands dirty in the cellular matrix to pull things together, allocate resources.
Still striking the medium.
Yeah, still striking the medium. When you move nature must move. It's built that way. It has to. There's no way it can't. So what we have now, especially in times of crisis or in imminent crisis, what we have now is an oncoming freight train going way too fast, too heavy for anybody to stop. There's no way to stop this freight train. Whatever that is, conceptually, it doesn't matter. It's a freight train. We all feel it, whether we can see it or not. We can all feel this freight train coming towards our little town, our little hamlet, our village, our city. It doesn't matter. This freight train is coming. And for those of us with the cognizance, we've been seeing it coming for a very long time. Our ancestors have been warning us of some of these things for a very long time, thousands of years even. And they warn us about these things because it was important for them to know of things heading their way. And if they could, they wanted to help us prepare for things heading our way. So knowing the freight train is coming and detaching yourself from the train saves who? Saves what? Detaching yourself from the stress or the angst, the fear of the train. You know you can't stop. How does that solve the problem? The ancients had many ways to go about addressing this particular problem. And the ways that they did it was, one of the ways they did it is to bury themselves in the problem. Take that emotional response to the physical stimuli or the existential stimuli. This could have been just conceptual. It would not even necessarily a war across the sea, but it could have been the rumor of war or the messages from the north saying that it's getting colder there, or from another place where it's getting hotter and it's harder to grow things. You know, these messages, rumors moving into the village. It's not even a full freight train yet. It's just a little bit of information, and it causes fear. It causes concern. The really popular ideology nowadays, contemporary wise, is to detach oneself from that negative emotion. Fear being evil, fear being bad.
It's negative.
It's negative. And to detach oneself from that sense of apprehension. And our ancestors, we Nemenha, we teach otherwise. We teach channel that. The ability to feel fear comes from the ancient ability to detect the lion in the grass in the safari that you can't see, but you can smell.
The savannah, anyway.
The savannah, yeah, the savannah. You can smell it. They're stinky. You know the predator is there. You can you know it's coming. Your instinctive response, the natural response with which we evolved over time, is to feel that sudden fight or flight. It is a subconscious thing. It is a thing over which no human has any control. An existential threat upon a person's existence.
You can't detach.
You can't detach from that. It's chemical. You cannot shut down the chemical response to the conscious realization or the subconscious realization you're going to be dead in 2 minutes. You cannot detach from that. I know people claim they do. Those people don't survive.
They die in 2 minutes.
They become
yes.
They get eaten.
Thank you.
And so people can respond in one of two ways. Either their nature or their conditioning causes them to freeze in place, and therefore they become lunch, or they run. They have to get distance between themselves and the predator. They have to get moving. And in that moment, their whole focus, their whole energy, this fear, this negative emotion becomes transformed into determination. New chemistry is involved. They channel that into escape and survival as opposed to standing still and getting eaten. Now, once they're moving, the whole neural matrix shifts, because now they have to be more aware of their surroundings, more so than they were in their everyday tasks. They've got to either find the tree, find the ledge, find a way to get back to the
not fall down,
the camp, not fall down. Mind your footing.
Don't fall down.
Is there a weapon? What have you got? Have you got a weapon? Have you got fire? That sort of thing. What have you got? And this becomes part, and your whole being, spiritually, physically, your whole being becomes immersed, entangled with the very processes have been built across billions of years in all living things. Why on earth detach from that? We've got where we are as a species because of these natural forces that live inside us, these natural spirits, these natural emotions that live inside us. So when we Nemenha face a crisis and we feel this apprehension, this fear, there's a freight train coming, we know about it, we've seen it coming, we know we can't stop it, we channel that fear, that anxiety, that apprehension into works and utterances of faith. Yes, a bad thing is happening, but that doesn't mean we can't do something about it. We may not be able to stop the freight train, but we maybe could move some houses out of its path.
Well, here's the thing. Listen to yourself talk there. When you said that the solution is in the problem, you cannot solve the problem by detaching from it. The solution is in the problem. Let's take the lion. What is the problem there? Is it the lion? No, the lion has no problem with the lion.
No,
there's a lot of problems.
The lion's good.
The problem is where you are.
Yeah.
So if you immerse yourself in that problem, the solution is get yourself not where you are.
And that happens a lot.
Get yourself from where you are, which is the problem, to somewhere else that may not be a problem, or in some other situation that wouldn't be a problem.
Or mindset.
Yeah.
If in crisis you find yourself immersed in a pattern language, a pattern of thought that freezes you in place, rather that engages you in problem solving with real world materials and situations, you've got yourself a problem. You have the problem, because the powers that be will wage their wars, and they will juggle the economy as best suits their purposes, to which nobody can truly understand, of which nobody can truly understand. It's way above all our pay grades. We're just cattle. We're just cattle, part of the gross national product. That's all we are. We're consumers. That's what we are.
Yeah.
So to take a spiritual approach to solving these problems at home is the key, because it takes a lot of people to make changes on a level that big, on a level that high, but nobody starts there. Nobody starts at that level. You have to start at home and hearth to make the changes. And so this is one of the first things that we counsel people. Like, what do you know about the crisis? And what do you know about your position in it? Because if you are stuck in a pattern of thought and behavior, a conditioning that freezes you in place when the lion is approaching, that you can smell but not see, so you don't know where it's coming from. You know it's present, and you know it's upwind. But
yeah, and Ho'oponopono is the same way. You know, they say if there's a problem and you're there, you're part of the problem. You're also part of the solution. So good points. Good point.
Yeah, so
you can't divide the problem from the solution. It never ever works. Never ever works.
So
and I know a lot of people like to detach, and I do know, because in the work that we all do, the three of us do, we run into these situations where people want to like leave their bodies or whatever, you know, travel outside. You know, but entanglement's a very powerful message you're sharing.
Yeah, and I don't mean to denigrate. I don't mean to offend the people of the specific beliefs or religions where their belief translates into practice. Hurry up and wait. I don't mean to offend them. We are Neminha.
Yeah.
And for Neminha,
let me ask you a question real quick.
We'll do.
Let me ask you a question. So I don't mean to interrupt you, but
hey, it's your call, man.
Can he do that? No.
So would you say that we live in a very different time where the lion is not necessarily in our particular place where we live? There really aren't lions, but there's other types of metaphors for lions.
Oh yeah.
Now, you know, you go to Africa and stuff, there's all kinds of stuff that will eat you. I mean, there's things that will eat you here too, but you have to be, like you said, you have to be cognitive of where you're at.
Right.
But a lot of things that we run into is that people have a lot of emotional struggles and you know, stuff with how to cope with life, like what's going on in life. And that's their lion, I guess.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I mean,
I have a real personal anxiety lately, and that is that I've decided in my retirement that I want to be a real part-time healer and more of a half-time, three-quarter-time potter. The trouble is, to do that and make it worth your time, you have to buy clay.
Yeah.
Now, lately, we've had a terrifically difficult time buying clay. So I talked to my you know, the distribution people, the people that bring us clay, or the people we order clay from, and I say, hey, what's up with the clay? Why can't we get the clay? And they say, well, we have the clay. There's no problem with supply. Okay. It's not a supply problem. It's a supply line problem. But for a potter who depends on the clay, that is an existential problem. That's like saying, I'm not going to have the income. And I know I'm not going to have the income that I need to pay the power bill, to buy the food, to pay the house payment, the car payment, all these things crowded. What's a potter to do? So, Iggy, you're the potter. You're the problem, obviously. What people don't realize is that we, in the year and a half that has passed, have lost. Your internet connection is unstable.
I see it. You're still there.
As much as a third of the truck drivers.
Yes.
And they're taking quite a lot of time to replace these truck drivers. It's just that's the supply line problem. So you're the potter with the supply line problem. What do you do? If you're a wait and see, if everything's okay, it's all good, and you're detaching, then you would probably start looking for another job, wouldn't you?
Well, depending on, you're asking me though.
Yeah, I'm putting you in it. You're the guy. What would you do?
Well, there's a lot of solutions. Either I would go to where they have the supply and get it myself if I'm able to. That's one solution. Number two, I would find other sources of clay that's in my area. We have a lot of clay here. And, you know, maybe we're able to use clay from the soil and learn how to process it. Not everybody will do that, but this is just how I think. You know?
Hypothetical. Yeah.
Yeah, hypothetical. This is the mind of Iggy here, you know.
Absolutely.
Thinking. So I would try to find the solution, especially if something that's very important and something that's, you know, for my income and it's going to feed my family. I will do just about anything to figure that solution out.
And that's the key, isn't it? It's do.
Mm-hmm.
You will look at the problem, how the problem affects you, and take yourself into a different place. What Joshua and I did in this situation is we went out and we found a source of clay that is a mile away. We will have free clay. So the huge expense of doing what we want to do goes away, and that part of hyperinflation is not going to affect us because it's a supply line problem. That is a problem that is much bigger than any of us individually. None of us can really do anything about the supply line problem.
Nope.
But we can look at the problem, find the solution, and do. That's entanglement. We now are going to go out and entangle ourselves with clay in the wild form, process it a little bit, and make our pots. And that is a better solution than waiting for another relief check from the government or just breathing deep and letting it pass over us.
Yeah.
That's what Jonathan Wellamotkin here is trying to express.
It's difficult to convey in a way that people will actually take seriously, because when you get on the social media and you get all the metaphysical self-help panels and forums, and you know, I've seen thousands of books on Amazon on this very subject. It's all to the clarion call of just detach from what makes you uncomfortable.
Don't let that negative emotion
from the negative emotions.
Don't give it space.
Yeah, that's what people are doing. And survival in a serious crisis, survival demands other. Ascension will allow it.
Yeah, go ahead.
But physical, natural survival of yourself, survival of your loved ones, survival of your community or your nation, which doesn't get to ascend with you. It's, you know, these are very natural physical things, temporal, worldly things. Yes. For us, Nemenha, that is the most sacred aspect of creation, is this relationship we have with ourselves, with our families, with our communities, our societies, and then the earth itself, all tied in together into one huge relationship, a complex entanglement of relationships. The deeper we can immerse ourselves into that energetic and material entanglement, the more keen we are, the more aware we are of the situations that are arising, the patterns that unfold around us. This is why I mentioned from the beginning, is that people do comment to us, like so much of this stuff has hit us. We've been blindsided by all this, especially distribution lines and stuff like that. And we're going, no,
we haven't.
Not really.
I mean, you and I were talking about this very thing when you were 18 years old. Yeah. I mean, we're talking a long time, half your life ago.
But then the next discourse that follows with people is, well, when? Yeah. When is it going to happen?
That's not useful if you can't tell me when I need to be prepared.
And that's where psychics and shamans get themselves all screwed up and upside down with people, is because they try to ascertain when.
Right.
And we've refused to do it as Nemenha Peli, as shaman, with all of our spiritual gifts. And yes, I'm bragging because I'm entitled.
He is entitled.
But I'm a millennial. Okay, I'll get away with it.
My title's in my truck. Let me go get it.
Your title.
No, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying because you know, I'm a different type of shaman. So I'm from Peru. You know, to teach you stuff. It's all about relationship with everything you're in. You talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
And you know, when I work with my students, I make them connect with nature. You know, everybody's waiting for the drum. When are we going to drum? No, that's not how it starts. You go out to the tree, you meet the tree, and you sit with the tree. And if you can't do that, see you later.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. I mean, that's how it is. It's that simple.
It boils down to, it's an element I was describing to my kids and to one of my students about the bundle ceremony. So in the Menha custom, we have our bundle opening ceremonies, and especially when we meet together in a group, everybody who has one will bring their sacred bundle with them, and we will all open our bundles as the facilitator is leading the assembly. But I pointed this out to my student. She's getting herself prepared and getting a small group of friends and family prepared for a Unipi gathering, a bundle opening gathering, just to have the ceremony and then share things amongst themselves. And she was struggling with the idea that she had to create some kind of liturgy to proclaim to everybody there.
Right.
And I reminded her that it's not about what she can instruct them to do. It was about her speaking the things that all the objects in her medicine bundle represent.
Right.
And her target audience is not the group. Her audience, the people to whom she's actually addressing, are the ancestors.
Right.
The gods, the great spirits, all of those heavenly beings with whom she has to do in her sacred ministry. Those are the people she's addressing. And then when she's done with that ceremony, she will pass a physical object, a sacred pipe or a smudge bowl or a smudge stick or incense of some kind. She will pass it from herself to somebody else. Now, she has used that item in ceremony many times by this point. Her intention, her will, and her physical material is infused into this physical object.
Yes.
She then passes that on to somebody else. That person makes a physical connection.
It's entanglement.
Entangling themselves with what she just did.
Oh, yeah.
But it goes further because the instruction then follows. It's not a mimicry of what they heard. They take the sacred object used in her ceremony, and they will make their professions, their proclamations of faith based in their own spiritual understanding with the same object. So we Nemenha, usually we have a set of prayers that we follow, but everyone says these prayers differently.
Yeah.
We have this pattern, these points. We represent these points differently. Each of us do. So when the facilitator takes that object and hands it to somebody, that becomes a connection between the core ceremony that for which they were all gathering anyway, but not only that, but that person's underlying core beliefs and values, the good things that occupy them, even if it's a totally different religion than the facilitator. But they take that object and they make those sacred expressions of good, faithful things, Thanksgiving things, and that even no matter how different, ties in spiritually and tangles with the original ceremony, and it continues in the circle in this way until, regardless of creed and culture, ethnicity, or religions, everybody in the circle has become of one heart and one mind, all things in common, all relations, because they have all done the same thing, but they're different peoples.
Yes.
But when peoples can come together to do a sacred thing in spite of all their differences or because of all their differences, then you have powerful entanglement that occurs. One thing that is absolutely necessary in times of crisis or preparation for crisis or preparation for change in general is people.
Yeah.
So that's one of the first things to take into account when a person is suffering from existential terror of a threat, a conceptual threat upon their status in life or their position or their physical health. First thing that we ask them to do is take an account of where they come from, what they want to do with themselves, where they're going, and then who are their people? Who are the people in their community? Who's their tribe? Who constitutes their medicine circle? Who constitutes their hoop? They need to start building a medicine wheel even before they put their hands on a sacred object. What forms the foundation of it? Instantly getting them engaged in a constructive activity begins easing the apprehension. It begins channeling it in the very same mechanisms that allowed a person to flee the lion or the tiger and take that fight or flight and transform it into the energy of escape and survival. We have the capacity, especially as shamans, to help people do exactly the same thing on a home and hearth level with a threat they can feel, but not necessarily see. They can sense the pressure rising. They can sense the spirit of it. It's coming. They can't give it form. They can't even give it name yet. So they cast about looking for a name. And the most convenient name for it is negative emotions. The most convenient label is how they feel. But we Nemenha are naturalists. We are permaculturists, and we understand that the physiology of emotions is not that simple. An emotion is a neurochemical and energetic response to a physical or psychological stimulus. The emotion is not the end of the story. How you feel should be a compass towards what's actually happening. It shouldn't be the end. It shouldn't be the focus.
Your feeling is not the happening. Feeling is a net result of the happening. This needs to be understood.
Yeah, this is what we're trying to teach people, and this is why I say people of any number of ideologies or religions or beliefs that will detach themselves, that believe that is what is necessary to detach themselves from these uncomfortable, unpleasant things of nature, will find nothing useful in what we're saying, nothing useful in what we're teaching, or the teachings of our ancestors, or the shamanism that we teach. It's like you said, you want to be a shaman in your tradition. Before they touch the drum, you want them to go connect with a tree. Well, what does that mean?
That's crazy. That's dumb.
If they're not going to do it, then they're not going to connect with nature, right?
Well, they're not going to connect with you. One.
Oh,
they're not going to connect. You know, they're not going to. See, most people go into this work because they want to help others, but yet they're helping themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
So the point is to find your center through nature, and nature will heal you in the best way she knows. And if you can't sit by the side of the road and look at a tree because you're embarrassed because someone's, because the chemicals and the compound.
Yeah.
But but I got better. I just put everybody go. You can go to nature. You can go to the park now. You don't have to stand in front of a tree. They made me stand out by the road. All right, so
yeah.
But that's my point. And then when you get to the mushrooms, you find the mushrooms, you find the animals, the birds, and all the things. Because I've had people say, "Hey, wow, I didn't know it was going to be like this." But that's the whole premise. Pachamama is like the whole core of shamanism, that you connect when you start ingesting ayahuasca and stuff like that. You don't do it for a trip. You do it because you want to connect with Pachamama at a race car pace. I mean, because that's what happens. And it's all about connections. It's all about the entanglement you're talking about. It's all about knowing who you are.
Yeah.
Outside of all this other 3D entanglement you're in that you don't think you're in, because you're meditating and you're going off into space, or wherever you're going. Yeah, we try to leave to leave our bodies sometimes. We try to leave and disconnect. Like you said, we try to go in a place. But even in meditation, it's entangling with the great mystery and listening. That's why you say you never ask.
There is no real detachment anyway.
Yeah.
No,
The idea, the English translation, the word detachment that we use does not mean anything compared or connected with what those people in those ancient beliefs did.
Oh, no, it's completely different.
It does not connect at all. Detachment does not actually mean do nothing. It means do a dang lot.
It's not like taking the trailer off your truck.
No, right.
We're detached now, but patch it back.
It's all good. Somebody stop the trailer. It's rolling down the hill.
Yeah. The way that detachment is used nowadays, especially in the modern self-help, especially in the new age self-help genres and contemporary
Just
New
shoot
Age
me
self-help
now.
is synonymous with what psychiatrists refer to as dissociation.
Dissociation. That's right.
Dissociation, if taken too far, can be a very unhealthy thing. And so this is why you're in your survival situations, or even just in preparation for change. And so some of the accounts in our ancient history, our people's ancient history, had less to do with the freight train of destruction and chaos, and more to do with the subtle but imminent change of the environment.
Right.
Changes they could track over years and decades and generations. Stories of grandma told about weather in this area do not reflect what the weather's doing now, that sort of thing. And there's a level of fear because people are stationed where they are, at least in the North Americas they were.
Say that again, because that's important.
There's a fear. People are stationed where they are. They are rooted, or they're trying to be.
Yeah.
They're trying to be. It's a natural human thing to try and find your place.
Yeah. What I find with a lot of the New Age teachings is, or the new, the philosophies of motivation and stuff, is nobody ever really gives you a map and helps you get to. They kind of hype you, and they leave you. It's kind of like, the thing is, and I watch this because I do this kind of work. I do that kind of work a little bit, but giving somebody a little bit of guidance is also very valuable. So they can know. Sometimes people just, we don't listen.
It's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
No,
it's not a bad thing.
People don't listen. We don't, we come to a point in this society where we don't listen to other people.
No.
One of the first medicines is listening, and proving shamanism is to listen to what the person is telling you and echoing back to them what you heard, because sometimes they don't even know what they're talking about, what they're going through, because they've told a story to themselves so much. The story has just become ballooned into different versions of itself that they don't even know where to go. And so I try to do that. I try to guide people and show them, look at this one, look at this one, look at this one. Give them options. I can't really tell them what to do because that's not my job. It's all healing and self-healing. They have to find that path in their own.
Yeah, there's so much emphasis on, I don't want to say emphasis, I want to say obsession. Obsession on this idea of self, of being a singularity of nature, self being separate from everything else, and being, because it's separate, the only thing worth considering, the only thing worth dedicating your time and energy, to the point where, back when we had our clinic in Springfield, we knew people who would not have any discussion whatsoever about negative emotions or health problems, even though they were coming, ironically, to naturopaths for help, natural health.
Weird
issues, but they wouldn't talk about negative things, uncomfortable things. They would not involve themselves in
that happens here too.
Their neighbors were going through, or anything, because it would attract such things to them. Totally detached from their society, totally detached from their community, totally detached from themselves, which is paradoxical, because these were some of the most selfish people I ever met in my life. So obsessed on self-power, self-empowerment, that they were blind to, number one, what was ailing them. It was like, it didn't matter how many times we told one gal she's drinking too much coffee. It didn't matter. She couldn't even see how that was relevant. How was that even relevant? But she was drinking too much coffee. She was essentially tanning her intestines, literally, with the coffee she was drinking. But because her intentions were right, or were set, and her vibrations were set, and her attention, her focus was totally keen on self-empowerment and manifestation, she couldn't even comprehend what it was we were trying to tell her. Ultimately, we weren't able to help her.
Right.
Ultimately, she ended up in the hospital.
Right.
Because her gut shut down. Yeah. So we have an extreme of what is so very popular. This is existential detachment from the very forces of nature. So this is why when addressing these events and the apprehension, the anxiety, social anxiety on these events, we take two fronts. And one is tell people to guide people, like you said, give them some pointers on how to evaluate whether what they're doing and what they're thinking is freezing them in place in response to the crisis that's coming conceptually or physically, as is the case with war and economic turmoil. That's a very physical crisis. That's not conceptual.
Right.
Or are they entangled enough with their natural environment? Are they entangled enough with their family and their community to begin working out the problem? Can they channel that negative emotion into a productive course for survival? That all happens inside. That all happens in the head and the heart. That is a paradigm shift that has to be taken. People are not being taught to do this. People are being told, get that mortgage. People are being told, buy the car, get the credit card, rely on Walmart. Amazon will be able to deliver to you with drones, no matter what it is you need, no matter what it is you want. And look, they even have their own delivery trucks now because the postal service is struggling. So Amazon steps in. They will take care of you. Facebook will never lie to you. Your politicians actually care about you.
And they don't lie ever.
And they never lie.
They never lie.
No.
We're all drunk here, if that's true.
Problem solving, critical thinking is removed from the public psyche.
Yes.
It's removed from the equation by a massive emphasis on self. And that produces the perfect feedlot. It produces the perfect energy consumer and goods producer.
Yeah.
In a perfectly industrialized social construct.
That's what the global economy is a feedlot.
It's a feedlot.
And they will consume regardless.
Oh yeah, totally.
It doesn't matter if it's $10, $5, or 15 or 20. They'll consume it.
Absolutely.
They must. They have no choice.
So when an individual is locked into the exact same idea, the exact same processes on a spiritual level, as they are locked in on their social economic level, it spells it's a recipe for absolute collapse crisis, in emergency, or in the threat of crisis, in the imminence of crisis. It begins laying the groundworks for absolute collapse.
Yeah.
Because there aren't any of the mechanisms, any of the tools in place that allowed tribes, clans, or entire peoples to address the concerns of their environment, make necessary changes, and thrive, or relocate, do the same, and thrive. So there are definite patterns there, and that's what we try to get people to see. But it feels like beating our heads against a brick wall because we're not noisy.
Yeah.
And the rest of the world says, ignore all of that. As long as you feel good, everything is okay.
How do you feel about that?
How do you feel about that? And if that gives you fear, why should you feel afraid? You shouldn't be afraid.
Why do you feel like that?
You just separate from that fear, separate from that stress and that anxiety. Never mind that it's a natural process. It's a natural response to something your subconscious mind has already determined actually constitutes a potential threat upon your existence. The work of assessment in most cases has already been done by the time the emotion manifests.
Right.
And this is where people get backwards. The emotion itself is a compass marker to a problem. The emotion itself is not the problem, except in specific cases. And we're dealing with mental illness in those cases where there is neurological, there's brain trauma, or there's neurochemical imbalances at play. There are people far more qualified than me to address those issues.
We send them on.
There's
I do the same thing
in those areas. Yeah.
You have to.
But if a person is relatively balanced in most ways, and they're not struggling on that extreme side, and they are capable of making critical decisions for their lives, then that should be the assessment. Can they run and assess how to survive as they're working? Can they put their body, move their matter, and strike the matter of nature around them, and do their practices freeze them in place? Those who
Yeah.
are frozen get eaten, because it's
Yeah.
all about food in nature.
It's a
Yeah.
feedback.
It's the only thing nature cares about. It is such a struggle to survive in a cosmos whose light burns everything. The very
Yeah.
light of the cosmos will incinerate everything.
Yeah.
We live in this amazing, wonderful shell with shield stronger than any light worker could ever produce, and it keeps us alive.
Is this true?
It's totally true. But it's a battle to survive. All of nature, from its greatest structure to its tiniest structure, is
Mhm.
always immersing itself in food. We humans need to address these things, or we will diminish. Those of us who can't will diminish, as beings do in nature all the time.
And so we move into now a facet of history where we're watching other humans, doing some really atrocious things to other people.
Yeah.
And and we try to like disassociate, we're like, well, it's over there kind of, but it's
I don't think you can. I mean,
no.
look at where we are right now. I was talking. Well, I've told this story. I've repeated this story, obviously, because I heard it, but to a lot of people now, 25%, between 23 and 24%. So I'm going to say 25% because it's nice and big round.
There's a window there.
There's a window of error, margin of error. 25% of the grain that the world relies upon right now, especially the Middle East and Africa and Indonesia, 25% of the wheat, the barley, the oats, the rye, of these grains, and to a certain extent even corn, did not get planted.
Yeah.
And some of it is winter. You plant in the fall in order to harvest the next year.
Right.
It will not be planted. In Ukraine is the breadbasket of Western Europe, and the Middle East and Africa. When you combine what isn't coming out of Russia because of the inability to ship, that's what a lot of the sanctions are doing, is they can't get that grain that they planted this year that will be harvestable and shippable. They can't put it onto ships. Nobody will take it. So what happens? What is the warning that is going out now, understanding that this little conflict in Europe will decrease the calorie production, the actual calorie, what do we call it? The menu, to speak, of the entire world. Now listen, in Rwanda had when I was younger, 20 years ago, Rwanda had an absolute devastating, apocalyptic, just a horrifying situation.
Yeah.
They could feed no one. Suddenly they had a complete collapse of the entire region. But that was based on about a 4% decrease in calories produced. We're about to see as much as a 15 to 20 to 17% decrease worldwide in calories. What does that mean to you, Iggy? What does that mean to you?
That doesn't sound very good.
That does not sound good. What must we do who understand that is, gosh, that's 3 times the tipping point
that Rwanda suffered.
That causes, it wasn't just Rwanda. Rwanda had the problem, but the whole Eastern African plateau was just plummeted into a massive famine that literally wiped out millions and millions of people. That was a tiny little country that, dropped 4% of their food production. What do? What we know what will happen. We will not lack food. We will not lack food. What will happen to us? As they starve, we will pay more.
Yeah.
The price will literally skyrocket. That is the only economic outcome that is feasible. We live in a feedlot. We are the cattle in a feedlot. we will be fed because we're more important than them. We have a more productive economy. We can buy our convenience. They can't.
Yeah.
And plus,
So-
we strip them of their natural, things that they grew to begin with, and we brought invasive species in there and taught them how to,
We've done a lot of things.
Yeah,
And because we have the capacity to buy our convenience.
and we buy our
will
convenience. You're right. You're
and
absolutely right.
It will be dear.
Yeah.
Those of us who can't afford that can just tough it, right? So what percentage of the American people are going to be able to afford that?
No,
It will be economically devastating.
Yeah.
So here again, we have no problem understanding the problem. We are intellectual enough to identify what the problem is. What is the problem? Think of the lion. Think of the freight train.
The supply lines.
The supply lines, things that you and I individually can do nothing about. We can't stop the war in Ukraine by wishing it to stop.
The social detachment from our food supply, food sources.
I can put a Ukrainian flag up on the flagpole here in southwestern Missouri and accomplish absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
What can I do? Well, the problem
feels good though.
The problem is me. The problem is you. So what do we do?
Yeah.
First, we have to find a solution for ourselves to be able to sustain ourselves.
Yeah. So in this whole big picture, what is the problem to me?
The problem is that we've become dependent on the supply chain, like you're saying, and we're willing to pay whatever it was going to cost. Most people don't even know. Most people don't even care. They're just going to pay it because then there's another group of people who just can't afford it. And they're either going to starve in America, or they're going to learn to grow stuff real quick,
or
fill me in because
they're going to take it.
You mean the people?
Others.
Oh yeah. So it'd be a Mad Max scenario.
People will take from people.
Oh
yeah, I can see that.
Americans do a lot of taking from each other.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Steal it. Yeah. So for us, we're good people. We're nice people. What we can do is grow food. How many of us cannot grow food? But here's the dig. We got to identify what the problem is, right? There is a problem with us growing food, isn't there? An intrinsic problem with us growing food. We have detached ourselves from the whole issue of drudgery. We are not going to go back to the 19th century and actually get our hands in the dirt.
Yeah.
Iggy, how many people in your housing development do you think know how many linear feet or how many square feet of potatoes they would have to grow to survive a winter with potatoes? Let's say potatoes, onions, and squash. You will survive the winter growing what you can grow in your flower beds, but how much must you grow to survive the winter?
Yeah, I really don't know. Honestly, I'll be honest with you.
How in the world could you not know?
Because I've never had to been in. I'm just guilty as everybody.
Yeah, same as everyone.
I grow exactly
what I
need every year. And that's sufficient. But now I understand that that's not going to be enough this time.
No. What do you grow? I like to grow.
I grow potatoes, carrots, onions, cilantro, tomatoes, hot peppers, white sage galore, sweetgrass.
Of course.
Yeah.
So how many pounds of potatoes do you eat right now a year?
Well, since I don't need a whole lot of potatoes right now because it kind of goes to my little tummy here, but that's gonna have to change there.
So let's see, how many pounds of wheat do you eat?
I'll eat more wheat than potatoes.
That does not answer my question.
Too much.
How many pounds of
God, I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't have no.
How many pounds of corn? None of us know what it takes. I mean, people do not realize that a family of 3 requires no less than around 700 pounds of vegetables a year. That is not counting the fruit. That is not counting grain. So if you needed to survive, just take survive. You could survive a bad situation over the course of a winter on potatoes, onions, maybe carrots, turnips were the big one. You can survive. You can make it with zero income. but every single person in your family would have to have 100 running feet, 100 square feet
Wow.
of potatoes.
I probably need more.
That's every person. So
Yeah.
in your family, how many people are there?
Well, there's 3 of us.
300 square feet
Of
of potatoes in your garden.
And that's
Now
not including
let's
the
go-
dog and the cat, you know.
Well, they're seldom going to get a cat to eat a potato. But
A dog, yes, but a cat, no.
the thing that people don't realize is that in order to survive where there is no supermarket to provide your
Mhm.
feedlot food,
Hmm.
we have to produce, a family of 3 must produce 2,100 square feet
Wow.
of vegetables that can be stored.
Yeah. that's a lot.
2,100 square feet. Doesn't sound like much. It's a moderate sized home, right? But the average garden isn't set up that way. How many square feet of gardening do you do?
Well, I don't know right off, to be honest with you.
Well, you can imagine your backyard or where you grow stuff. How many square feet are there? Just use your mind's eye. Most people average about 300 square feet total.
Yeah, on average.
Total. Most people, and I have to say, most people don't grow anything.
A lot of the soil here is not very good. In my backyard is not very good either.
We don't use the soil
Yeah.
where we
But I'm
live.
just saying it's just clay,
You can't
you know.
use it at all. You
Yeah.
build up.
We
Yeah,
are
you-
permaculturists.
Yeah,
That is no
come on,
excuse.
Don't give me soil.
No, I do
Not soil.
do
Okay.
have my permaculture areas.
You've seen our soil. It's sand, and there's not a lot you can grow on it. But
Yeah.
Here's the thing. The problem is not just that the Ukraine didn't plant grain.
Mhm.
The problem is not just that the ships are not going to move Russian grain. The problem is not that at all. The problem is us. The problem is that we require the trough, and the trough must be filled for us, and we will pay for our convenience.
Mhm.
The solution to the problem is to decide when we're going to set aside that convenience and actually produce ourselves something. Joshua and I have worked hard over the past couple of years, and now we're up to around 4,000 square feet of garden
Mhm.
and perennial garden. So the idea is to solve that problem. We don't make a big income, and so this coming crisis could be devastating to us. We may not be able to buy the food that we need, and so we must have it on hand. We have to grow it. We won't be able to buy the clay we need to pursue even a part-time career in art pottery.
Yeah.
Or utilitarian pottery.
Yeah.
We have to go out and we have to get our clay. This is something that Americans are going to be, it's going to hit Americans in the face in the coming 2 to 3 years. I'll put a time frame on it because there's a lag. There's a food supply that gets drawn down, and then bam.
And then the major hammer hits.
Yeah, the hammer hits. And it's a really good example of problem solving, as Wellamotkin was so eloquently describing. This is an excellent example. If anybody wants to really understand entanglement, go out and plant something.
Mhm.
So I asked you the last time we spoke, have you planted your potato? Did you
Yes.
plant potatoes?
Yes. They're planted.
You did that little test. I was reading some of the responses on Facebook.
Yeah, there wasn't too many, were there?
They were not very many, and they were all kind of
Flippant.
Most of them were quite flippant.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They joked about it. I love the Mr. Potato Head response. That was so useful.
That helps a
It
lot.
was so useful. Yeah, that helps a lot. And yet, it's dead serious. It could be more dead serious than any of us know. And you know me, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but we could be looking at the coming freight train, and all we have are people standing on the tracks watching for the freight train.
Yeah.
We better get off the tracks, and we are all capable of producing. So we need to get away from the trough and start producing, because it is not going to get better.
Yeah.
We have economic tipping point, ecologic tipping point. We have war. We have disease. It's stacking up. We have climate change. We have all these things stacking up, and it is not going to get better. I'm not going to be around when you are faced with what's going to be happening in 2050. You know, that's too long.
Yeah,
I'm going to be gone. So
I'm going to be giving heads up to my grandkids.
yeah, I guess I don't have to worry about that. That's not my problem.
Detach.
I will detach from it, and I'll just continue working towards having a better retirement during the time that I have. That is not going to be available to our grandchildren.
Nope.
That will not be an option. We're the ones who did this. It's our problem. We are the problem. We, after all, are the cattle. And in a feedlot, the only thing that really matters is the cattle. It's the only thing that makes any money. Everything else costs.
Yep.
So that's my message for today as a permaculturist, is that there will be no future without humans becoming producers again.
Becoming humans instead of cattle.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been cattle for a long time.
Since the first railroad was built,
Yeah.
it changed everything.
Watch
when massive
the
amounts
history.
amounts of resources could be moved to places that did not naturally contain these resources, when it was convenient, and we would not consider it convenient in our day. The length at which it took to get materials on those rails to somewhere else, to us, is way too long. But comparatively speaking, it was world changing. It was so much faster and so much more dependable, more reliable than anything that had done before, any supply line ever conceived. People no longer had to grow gardens because the general store could, you put in your order next month, you got the stuff you needed at the general store.
Yeah.
And then Piggly Wiggly invented the shopping cart and broke down the grain barrels and packaged things and put it on the shelf, made people come in and get it that way.
And
so everything changed. The whole evolution of shopping.
Well, look at how we build our houses. We do not build our houses now to house a family.
No.
We build our houses to succor and sustain and support an automobile.
Yeah.
And the adjuvant rooms in a house are where the people reside. But the whole idea is to maintain that automobile. It is presented to the road in a certain way out of convenience. The whole housing development is built in a certain way, based upon the convenience. The car gets you to the job gets you the money, the money buys the food, and it's a vicious circle. But you look at the housing development, and one of the standard policies in all housing developments, we were talking about your soil. When a housing development is approved and has all of its permits, the first thing they do is they remove the topsoil and sell it in order to put the sidewalks and the curbs in.
Yeah. And then they dump the shingles in the ground and bury them.
You do not have in housing developments land that is suitable to make food, but you do have a piece of property that you own, that you're king in your own castle. And it is built for the automobile. You look at the house that you're living in right now, and what's the first thing you see when you drive up? You
see cars, and they're all nothing but driveway cars.
The
garage is the first thing you see.
The access is driveway and garage, and then the rest of the house is just kind of there. It's just kind of there. We have created this culture and this society, and the house is the example of who we are. This is our tribe. Our tribe will ascend. We will all ascend, but we won't wanna. We will just perish. Now that sounds terrible because, of course, we're not all going to perish, but we need to observe the problem deeply and change it. We need to stop this roller coaster to destruction. The house, all the commodities we need. We've got to stop worshiping tech to the point where we think it's going to save our lives. We have to stop being nothing but consumers. We're never going to stop consuming, obviously. Just look at my game. But we have to also start being producers. If we can't bring ourselves to be producers again in our particular society in America, a lot of Americans are going to ascend when they ought not to have. That's my message. Grow potatoes.
Yeah.
that's the other front. I mentioned
physical front.
Yeah, I mentioned the two fronts with which we approach these particular issues. The one is the psychological, the spiritual, and the other is purely physical, practical. And purely physical, practical always boils down to food. Now,
well, it boils down to certain necessary things. It's food, the hierarchy of needs. It's food, it's shelter, it's clothing, it's fuel, it's automobile. And then you start getting into, well, it's conveyance, right? Whether it's horse or whether it's a goat buggy or whatever. And then you can start getting into more luxury cultural items, you know, like having the time to sit down and read a book. But that's way after you've addressed the hierarchy of needs. Mm-hmm. Food is the major hierarchy of need, and then shelter is second. Yeah. We don't produce any of that for ourselves. We rely on the labor of others, the productivity of others, to provide us with these most important things. We need to come back from that. We need to disabuse ourselves to a certain degree, at least to some measurable degree, from the consumer society. We're looking at the failure of global economy and global supply lines. Every single one of us are an example of that. When we talk to people who are saying, no, we have plenty of that. The feed store, we have plenty of materials for you. We just can't get them to you because the truckers died. Well, Iggy, what killed the truckers? Yeah. A third of the truckers died in the last year and a half.
I'm going to assume that it was probably COVID.
It was COVID.
Yeah.
COVID killed a third of the truckers. On the average, 2% of the truckers die each year because it's a lot. It's a big death toll because they generally are really, really large guys who never move their bodies.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And they die from the consequent effects of that kind of lifestyle. So it's 2% is a real high death rate for that profession, but they manage the training of new truckers to make up for that, right?
Yeah.
You could not do it in the last year and a half, and that is a big portion of our stateside supply line problem. They can't get the materials to us because of the lack of truckers. Now, will the truckers stop dying to that degree?
Well, possibly to some degree.
Until the pandemic slows down, until we don't have variants that keeps hitting great big fat and smoking and drinking and eating all kinds of everything and never moving their bodies. Truckers.
Well, sitting in a chair will kill you faster than anything. So.
Oh yeah, I know it does. Just sitting there is just a nightmare. We're going to continue to see that, and so that piece of the supply line problem will not be solved by government. You know, maybe the ships sitting out off the coast, maybe that will be solved by, governmental process, but the truckers nobody can snap their fingers and make truckers appear.
No.
So your future, like looking into, like forecasting a little bit into the future. I know you're not a fortune teller or anything like that.
Oh,
but,
yes,
just your vision of what you're seeing. Do you see like America? We'll just use America as an example. Since a lot of people don't have the skills, pretty much what we're talking about, the skills to maintain or take care of themselves because they let others do it for them. Do you see where there's going to be a serious problem in the future if things don't change?
There's no way.
It will be a problem. The patterns are evident.
Yeah, our society is not sustainable. We are already faced with tipping points. There is no coming back from it. The climate thing we can't fix in our lifetime. Nothing we can do now will change what our grandchildren must suffer because of what we have done. Nothing that we can do will turn it around. We can do some things now that will help for our great grandchildren, but
I was going to say there's an exception, and the exception is what information and preparation can be made for their sake.
Yeah,
we can't do things to correct things. We can't fix this problem right here, right now. But we can create the tools and the knowledge necessary for my children and their children to survive the environment we created for them.
And not necessarily just survival, but they could
thrive.
They could thrive People thrive in the Sahara Desert because they know how, because they were taught how.
Right.
They, you know,
right.
We're
so basically
not,
what you're
America's not going to disappear, but our system is unsustainable. There is no sustaining this culture that we have created. There will be other cultures arise, and everything will go on, and everything will be fine, except for the people that don't survive it.
Yeah,
I think it's not going to be great for the elderly, and it's not going to be great for the. Obviously, it's not going to be great for the coastlines. What do you do?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you have to move now. It's already happening in Miami.
Any of the high density populations where the majority of the population are living in tenements and apartments and condos without the means to produce anything for themselves, they'll evacuate. They'll leave those high concentration zones because they can't provide for themselves.
Yeah, we're gonna witness. You and I are still, you know, you're younger than I am, but you and I are gonna witness things the likes of which no one in the last 3 generations have. That we're going to see things that we thought were impossible to see in our lifetimes. That's my crystal ball talking. We will see those things, and the degree to which we make it through them with any you know, amount or measure of happiness and prosperity depends upon what we decide to produce.
So basically what you're saying too is the generation of children are, you know, our grandkids not going to see it, but because they're going to have to develop it and fix it themselves and plant it and grow it and reteach. So the next group will be learning a whole different way of living.
There has to be an entire generation that does not do what we have done.
Yeah.
And then that generation,
that's what it would take.
That generation must produce a generation that will rebuild. But there has to be an entire generation that will not do what we have done. How do you obtain that? There's only one way. There's only one way. You lose a generation.
Yeah,
that is harsh.
Yeah,
I was just thinking that. I was like, you know, that means,
oh my gosh. And this is we see the effects of this in Europe, in Asia, when we look in to a large degree in the, you know, in the New World as well. But you look at the effect of the World War. The last World War reduced the population by a certain amount, and you can watch the effect on that economically, and that is something that can be measured. We don't know what form this is all going to take, but what we do know from our vantage point, every one of our vantage point, is that what we're doing now is not sustainable.
Yeah.
When you have a complex system such as a world economy or a world ecology or culture, society, when you have a complex system that cannot sustain itself, that complex system goes to a certain bubble point, the bubble bursts, and the system collapses.
Yeah.
Now, a system collapse the size of a culture is humongous. We have ample
we have examples.
Yeah,
we have examples.
History is chock full of them.
Yeah,
Why? It's not going to happen to us because it wasn't our turn. This is our turn, and it's not going to happen to us because somehow there's this new enlightenment, there's this new energetic improvement in our species or something. The aliens are going to come and save us with technology. No, you know, that ain't going to happen. We must become producers, and the degree to which we become producers again will mitigate how bad it can be. And in fact, it could mitigate it to the point where it's not that bad at all. For producers,
it provides a foundation for the next generation.
Yeah.
If the generation to come is given no framework, no foundation, no knowledge with which to enact any of the things we know needs to be changed, if our generations don't do that, don't prepare the way for them, it's delayed. It'll go into the next generation. And
they'll have to do it.
The next generation.
They'll have to do it.
At some point, a generation has to do it.
Right.
A whole generation will have to take up this work. And here's the ethical conundrum that our generations, dad's, yours, mine, our generations are faced with. We can see what's happening.
Yeah.
We can see
This has
it.
not come as a
This is not a
surprise.
surprise. Do we detach ourselves from the problem for the sake of feeling good about ourselves,
For our convenience,
for
and
our
just pay the
convenience,
bill.
Mhm.
or do we set our mind to those who are to come? They are depending on us and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
They are depending on us to
Yeah.
provide something for them
Look,
that they're absolutely going to need to thrive in the world that we built for them.
who's going to teach them about that stuff? Because literally half the population of our country don't give two shits.
That's
about
that's basically what it boils down to.
Yeah. They're,
And then
they're populist individualists.
and they don't believe that nothing's gonna happen.
No,
Yeah, right.
They really, I mean, they live in a bubble and they live in it so isolated. Come on.
it's all fraud. It's all
Whatever,
it's all,
Iggy, what you talking about?
oh, it's not really happening. It's not really happening. It's
You
not
and
gonna
those
happen to
guys in
me.
Missouri.
Well, here's the thing. In Missouri, as it happens where we sit right now, global warming will affect us by about 5% of the state gross state product.
Yeah.
So in other words, Missouri will not be affected at all. It will be as if it never happened.
Mhm.
Global warming by 2050. But you look at the same situation in Florida, and Florida will be a third the size it is right now.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of the population of Florida is on the coast, which will not be coast anymore. It'll be, you know,
Submarine.
It'll be under.
Yeah.
It'll be, yeah. And yeah, 80% of the American population lives upon the coasts, and they will have to move inward. This we know. This has happened before.
Oh, yeah.
We know all about this. But, you know, where 50%, literally 50% of the people in this country don't care,
That's a lot.
don't believe, don't care. How do we, our job, we have a big job ahead of us to try and get enough information in the heads of younger people who will be coming up so that they can be producers again when they have that kind of stigma and that kind of peer pressure to not do anything. And that's what the populists are doing, is absolutely nothing. I mean, for crying out loud, I hate to go out political, but the Republican Party didn't even come up with a platform. Now that by definition is do nothing about anything.
Yeah.
Come on. That's where we are. So those of us who are mouthy, and those of us who are engaged, and those of us who believe in teaching people principles like this, principles merely of become a producer again and live, we have to actually step up the pace. We actually have to redouble our efforts because, you know, there are a lot fewer of us.
This has become our primary focus. You know, Nemenho's been around for over 20 years now. And our councils and our Peli have steered us as best we can through all of the changes Nemenho's undergone. But universally now the consensus is we have to teach these things, because we have to get this knowledge into the minds of young people as much as possible for the benefit of their grandchildren. Because it's not, I mean, if we don't, then it's not going to be their great grandchildren.
Yeah, that's a really good example.
It's going to be their great grandchildren.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you know, so that has become our focus and our mission, and it's going to stay that way.
I don't see it happening because we're poor.
It's a powerful mission.
We're not going to be able to absorb the kind of superinflation that could happen. We have to mitigate that kind of hyperinflation by being producers. And just think about it. Hyperinflation is anything over 20%. We've already done that. It's going to get worse. But if you can take what you produce in just food alone, you can completely mitigate what would be devastating to another family who had to buy everything with money.
Yeah. And when we're talking growing food, when we're talking growing gardens, every individual who decides that they're going to put plants in pots and bags and urns and boxes, you know, if they start to grow things, be mindful of the items you choose. Don't pick the stuff that fills a salad.
Right.
Pick the stuff that would, or 100 years
Calories.
ago, 100 years ago, fill a cellar.
Calories.
Mhm.
Choose
The stuff that
calorie
will
items.
survive storage through the winter.
Yeah.
Pick those items.
Yeah.
You can grow anything under a lamp, literally anything under a lamp with dirt and water.
Mhm.
Yeah. Things grow.
Yeah.
That's one thing we know.
Life
And
grows.
what's more, things will grow really well 4 degrees hotter.
Yeah.
That's not going to change anything. It's just going to kind of stir up where things grow and
Yeah,
how things
yeah.
grow. But things are still going to grow amazing. Like, is that a amazing? Like, yeah, really,
It is now.
really lots. Things
Yeah.
will continue to grow abundantly. The
Yeah,
planet is
yeah.
not going to be hurt by global
Oh no,
warming.
I never.
only
It's us. Yeah, it's always been us. Yeah.
us.
It's us.
There again,
We will have
the
to
problem
adapt.
is not the freight train. The freight train comes through town every day.
Yeah.
The problem are the idiots who are standing on the rail.
Yeah. Mother Nature's like, I don't know. I told you. Like, listen. No,
I don't know.
I don't know.
Move. Yeah. Yeah.
Then you have the other
us.
50% that doesn't really. They want to do well, but yet they don't know how.
Right.
You know,
We
but
gotta-
in that 50%, there's like a small percentage that knows how.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, you're right.
And
you
they're
know,
disappearing.
and you're talking about the take mentality, which that seems like really simple job. Like that's like the old West, you know.
Yeah.
Just take it. Well, that can be really nasty.
Yeah, that paradigm, excuse me, that paradigm arises from the very processes through which we either channel fear into a productive energy, a productive output, or freeze in place.
Collapse.
If a person chooses to detach from that fear and fails,
Mhm.
the subconscious mind emphasizes that fear into what can instantly transform into panic.
Terror.
When individuals experience panic and terror, rational thought ceases altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is where people become a mob. That's where people
We've also seen that in the
justify
last 2 years.
hurting other people
Yeah.
to get what they need because they're in such a state of panic that morality takes a backseat.
Yeah.
So this is where you
Unfortunately,
need, yeah, but this is where a person has the choice to make when they detect, they sense the lion, don't know where it is, but they have this moment where they get to choose because we are humans. We
Mhm.
have this noble agency that allows us this single breath, this single moment where we get to choose how we're going to respond to our situation. We are animals, yes, but we are also not only animals. We have an agency. And in that critical moment, we get to pick, detach from this uncomfortable emotion and see where that takes us. Channel that cognitive energy, that neurological, psychological energy into problem solving, or descend into panic.
Mob. Become a mob of
Become a
individuals.
mob of
A
individuals.
mob of individuals is not a collective. They do not act collectively.
Mhm.
They act as a big group of individuals in panic and terror mode.
Yeah.
That we have seen. We have seen that threaten
Mhm.
our cities, our towns, our nation. We have seen that happen.
Congress itself. We've
We-
seen it threaten Congress itself.
Our very
It sounds
constitutional-
like a Mad Max scenario.
It is.
Yeah.
You know?
It's the beginnings. I don't think it'll ever get. I don't know how. Desertification would have to happen in a really big way,
Yeah.
and it may in parts of the
regions.
country,
Yeah.
in regions, but
Yeah.
we're not going to see that. We will see more of that around other parts of the world. Greater desertification in Africa, for example, is a known entity.
Mhm.
But it's the mentality, it's the psyche.
Yeah.
It is the
Yeah.
culture that is developing. We have created a culture that is showing us its symptoms.
Mhm.
Mhm.
When crisis happens, what is the result?
Looting.
Yeah, I mean, there have been
Yeah.
there have been demonstrations that started out peaceful and became, burning the town down,
Yeah.
burning the country down. That's where we are. You can't. It's like any disease, Iggy. You can't
Mhm.
deny that a disease exists if you're staring the symptoms in the face.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, you can,
You.
but you ascend.
Yeah. There I go. There he goes.
What is it on ghost? No, I'm not going to.
No. We're good.
All
We have
right.
a new favorite show we're watching.
What are you watching?
Ghosts.
Oh
That's a
yeah, that's a
comedy.
good show.
On
Yeah, it's pretty. I've
Paramount
seen it.
Plus.
Yeah.
I
It's funny.
absolutely love that show.
The
It's so good.
one-liners. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Don't get me started.
Yeah,
But anyway,
I watch Doctor Who and the Titans right now.
awesome.
I love them both.
Him and Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have some serious things coming our way, and there are ways to mitigate. Permaculture is the best possible plan to mitigate the issue of teaching people how to produce, because it's not just a collection of gardening techniques.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah,
It is a culture that requires you to make good, or to do critical decision making, to observe, to entangle. It speaks of and teaches of complex systems in a reliable manner.
yeah.
And it's easy for anybody to understand. So we're focusing on that. We're really concentrating on that, getting our demonstration site finished so that the ceremonial center here is a place to teach the healing of the earth, and everything else we do in the Menha. So we're giving it a try. There's going to be a lot more opportunity for people to come here, but also we're going to be filming stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we're making the concentrated effort. We're not the only people in the world doing this. Permaculture is only a kind of an unknown thing
In the U.S.
in the United States. It's really getting hot out there in the rest of the world. So,
Yeah.
teaching is being done and will continue to be done. But you're not going to find this in the public schools. A government school will not teach this material.
No, they want you to pick A, B, or C on the shelf.
Oh yeah.
It's a feedlot.
It's a feedlot.
That's
And it's
absolutely
practically the same thing, so it's like, you want this rice-a-roni or this rice-a-roni or this labeled off rice-a-roni?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, we were looking for, what was it we were looking for? There used to be a lot of choice. And there's like 2.
I was looking for mac and cheese.
Mac and cheese.
I was looking for mac and cheese.
Wonderful.
And I was accustomed.
Wonderful food.
My kids love mac and cheese.
Oh yeah.
And every once in a while I'll get it for them. I usually try to provide healthier dishes when they're with me on the weekends, but every once in a while it's like, you know what, a cheesy pasta is just really good.
Yeah.
And I am accustomed to being able to go to the shelf and see a selection which can preoccupy me for 2 or 3 minutes. I'm used to that. And I was there the other day and it was like, 1, it's regular, it's yellow, it's overpriced because it's craft.
Yeah.
And I'm going,
What the heck?
okay.
Yeah.
Put it in
So
the cart.
what about water resources?
Water's tricky, especially if you're in a city.
Yeah, water. It comes down to when I say the hierarchy of needs. Of course, food is anything you put in your mouth. It's actually food and water.
Yeah,
water is the biggest issue. Depends on where you are in the country. Up in Ohio, for example, you will have more water. That's global warming will bring you more water. Global warming will bring us a little bit less, but we'll have it at different times of the year, which will be more. I mean, we will actually be able to grow more because of global warming. We put ourselves in the right place because we have been thinking about this for 20 years.
Yeah.
So if you can see that far ahead, you can make some plans. But yeah, water is going to be a huge issue, mainly because of the infrastructure problems. The fact that 80% of people live on the coasts, and that the groundwater will be encroached upon by salt water.
Yeah.
So all new infrastructure. I mean, but they're moving out of town anyway, right? So why not build new infrastructure?
And this is an element in our teaching at present, is that we're not focused on teaching people how to survive in the city. Because there's nothing about the big city that is sustainable in an ecological crisis like what we're foreseeing.
If you're worried about survival, that's not the place to survive.
What we are focusing on are the tools, the skills, the wisdom, the critical thing, the ability to critically analyze and adapt to your situation wherever you land.
Yeah.
Those are the tools you need.
Or if you remain in the city, you've got to produce that which will give you a greater income or
Mhm.
offset the loss of income so that you can continue to buy.
Yes. Yeah. There are those two routes to take when it comes to hyperinflation and dependency on the supply line. Either
Mhm.
you reduce your dependency by
Mhm.
removing yourself from a location that is hyper dependent, or keep your location and offset your dependence with whatever you can
Right.
produce on site.
Yeah. Now, where you live in Ohio, for example, you live in Columbus, which gets how many inches of rain?
We get quite a bit. It's pretty
Yeah,
sustainable.
you get more than we do.
Yeah.
You get quite a bit more than we.
We've had more rain this spring than we've ever had.
Yeah, you get
Mhm.
you get pretty close to what Seattle gets. Oddly, that's
Yeah,
a ton.
we get rain tomorrow.
Yeah, we're getting rain today. But you can use your roof to collect enough water to provide your
Oh,
personal
yeah.
water needs for the whole
Mhm.
year. It's just a
Mhm.
matter of having the right gear.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, water is when it comes out of the
Storage
sky
capacity.
like it does in your town. Wow, that's a lot easier. Now you're talking New Mexico, there may not be any.
Yeah.
There may be nothing that
Mhm.
anybody can do. But look, if anybody is
People have thrived in
No,
the
look at-
desert.
look at in Jordan. Now, most of Jordan is below sea level. Most
Yeah,
of Jordan is
yeah.
below the Dead Sea. And most of Jordan's agricultural lands became fused with salt water. The salt water came up
Mhm.
because they were pumping all the fresh water out and using it
Mhm.
for irrigation. So they literally sucked it in from the Mediterranean and the Dead Sea, and they have these desertifications or saltiness. And little 10-acre piece, I've talked about this before, and Jeff Lawton and his wife went in and took a 10-acre piece and turned it into a paradise,
Mhm.
and then got run out by the war and had to leave for years and years. When they went back, they thought they were going to see a piece of desert again and they'd have to rebuild it all. They did not. What they did in permaculture was reshape the land
Mhm.
so that every tiny little bit of condensation was stored, and they had cisterns full of water that was feeding the perennial crop, to the effect that the town next door was getting a marketable crop of olives and of pomegranate and of pineapple and of peaches and apricots, and you know, the list goes on. And they were sad to see the Lawtons come back into their 10 acres because they would have to buy that now instead of just poach it.
Right.
Well, that got so much attention in Jordan that they were contracted by the government to go and plant similar situations to the tune of 2.5 million trees.
Wow.
If you can do that in the absolute worst environment on the face of the planet, imagine what you can do in your backyard, anybody's backyard.
Yeah.
I just don't take it from anybody. No complaining anymore.
Our soil is too bad. Bull crap.
It's too hot. We get too much rain. We don't get enough rain.
Yeah.
It just doesn't matter. We have a system. We have complex systems. We have the ability to observe complex systems and change the systems, design the systems, and really turn people into producers again, no matter what their job is or where they live.
The future is dire and it's coming, and there's nothing we can do to stop it.
Yeah.
But that truth right there does not eliminate the depths of our hope and our determination.
Here's the paradox. The future is dire. We're looking at a no-win, a Kobayashi Maru. We're looking at a no-win scenario. We're looking at absolute predictable collapse. The future is dire, and yet the future will be filled with abundance.
Yeah.
There's the paradox.
It just might be a little different than what our generation called abundance.
We need to, well, it's just going to be just as abundance. It's just going to be abundant in other places in other ways. And we have to be willing to be the producers that can move into that abundance and not just stand back and let death and disaster flow over us and hope that the government will pay us another, $1,200.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a joke.
Come on. That's where we are. That's where we are.
So we're getting close to that time there. Closing thoughts, guys. What do you want to leave with the listener? Now, we talked about a lot of stuff, but something you want to just share with them that you think that's maybe you didn't get to squeeze in there.
Have you planted your potato?
Yeah, I was going to say, are you stuck, and have you planted your potatoes?
Are you stuck?
Are you stuck? frozen in place.
Make sure you're not frozen.
Make sure you're not frozen. Ideologically, spiritually, psychologically, don't be frozen in place.
You can't stand there on the tracks, Iggy.
No.
You got to get off the tracks.
Nemenhod.org. Nemenhod.org, right?
Yeah.
If they want to learn more about permaculture.
And have you planted your potatoes?
Have you planted your potato? I don't care where you plant it. Plant your potato.
And turnips.
Sounds good.
Potato. If you plant one potato and you sit it in the middle of your kitchen table, it will remind you of what you can do.
There's hope there.
You will remind yourself every time you look at that, hey, I can produce something, even if it's one potato in the middle of your dining room table.
The world's going to hell, but it's good for us to be here because I've got this right here.
It is good for us to be here because I can grow a dang potato.
It's good to be here.
That's my final thought.
Yeah,
it is good for
us to be here. Yeah.
Perfect. You got it, folks. Grow your papas. Grow your papas. Grow your potatoes. All right, so gentlemen, I want to thank you for just sharing your plethora of knowledge. It's just amazing. You guys. I mean,
we're just obsessed.
We could talk all night. I know, but
my butt hurts.
we want to move ourselves and keep going, but so we'll get you back on the air again and share. And people really enjoy your talks. And I know someone's got a crush on Jonathan, but I won't tell you about it.
Not me, of course.
But anyhow, I want to thank you guys. I want to thank you very much for everything. You guys mean the world to me, and I am blessed every day that I have met you and you're in my life. Susie and I are really grateful for you guys, and we going to grow up potatoes.
Next time I'm going to talk about fermentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are a lot of ways to address these issues.
Yep.
Yeah.
So hang tight. I'm going to go off the feed here and we'll talk to you off the air here real quick. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. All right, guys. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.